Group, but I am Laura Bryant. I'm the Business Development Manager here in Southwest Florida for Castle Group. If you're not familiar with Castle Group, we are a full-service on-site property management company. So if you are in a building that has full-time on-site management and you have any questions about our services, please feel free to reach out. I want to thank Pure Wireless for connecting with us and being willing to educate all of our managers, building managers, and share their expertise and knowledge about expanding our services in our buildings. I know you're working all through Collier County, but Dane, thank you. I'd like to introduce Dane Bowling, founder and CTO of Pure Wireless, and I'd like you to tell us a little bit about what you do and how long you've been here, and a little bit about your company.
Well, thank you, Laura. We're more than happy to bring this course to you. Our company focuses on existing, primarily high-rise buildings throughout, from Marco all the way up to Tampa. We've primarily Southwest Florida. And what we do is we bring technologies into buildings to make them safer and make them smarter. So by doing, what does that mean exactly? Is that we analyze the building to see where we can help bring up the quality of the wireless within that building. And that wireless could be public safety, which is what we're talking about today, which is fire code. It can be cellular, and it could be Wi-Fi. So we're very excited to bring this course to you. We focus primarily, again, on high-rise buildings and work with a lot of the property management firms, and I'm very excited to help and answer any questions we can for Castle Group. Wayne Martin is a wealth of knowledge in public safety. He can tell you all about him, but I'll turn it over to Wayne and let him introduce himself.
All right, Wayne, you're just muted. I know, we always forget that. It's okay. We'll edit that out.
Thank you, Dane. And it's a pleasure to be here today. I serve as Public Safety Director for Pure Wireless. I have over 40 years in public safety in the fire service. I was a fire chief for 11 years, 15 years actually, in 2 different locations. And I was a fire marshal, fire inspector. So here in Florida, so I understand the code, and I understand the implementation of the code, and I understand the spirit of the code.
Wonderful. Thank you, Wayne. All right, well, without any further ado, we will get started with your class. 2A, Communication Enhancement Systems, right?
Yep. That's what we're going to talk about today. And as we go through that, we're going to look at some objectives today. The responsibilities for the parties, which would be you, the information to fully understand the importance of the two-way communication system. And we're connecting the dots today is what we're doing.
Wonderful. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. As we go through the objectives, these are our learning points. We want to identify dates for compliance. That becomes important for the installation of these two-way communication systems. The next one is an overview of the 911 system, what happens with failure of two-way radio communication systems, and we're going to talk a little bit about safety.
Wonderful.
Statutory requirements. This is Florida statute. The legislature saw fit to do this. I'm going to talk about who the authority having jurisdiction is, as well as the different fire departments, how they represent you, or you may interact with them in the city, county, or a fire district. We're going to look a little bit about legal, an opinion by legal counsel on this, as well as with the fire prevention code, and then compliance. In building wireless coverage, looking at use of the 911 system and how important that is on a daily basis, and then reverse 911 notifications.
I'm interested to learn about that.
Who's it important to, these systems? It's important to fire, law enforcement, and emergency medical services. Testing and reporting. What does it take with these systems to get them in place? As far as a 20-point testing system, it's done on all floors, and the importance of reporting to the AHJ. We have an implementation. of the process and the fact that we should be testing now, when permits are required, installing by January 1, 2025, how quickly that's approaching, and the economic cost of compliance or non-compliance.
We've got lots of deadlines in 2025, guys, for towers, huh?
It's going to come up quick.
Yeah.
So who's responsible? The community association manager. I put that on top because you're the key to this. Obviously, your board of directors. What can occur possibly if someone is trying to sell a unit? And then violation of the fire prevention code. And this is in the fire prevention code. And then when we get to the bottom, the end of this program, we're going to just kind of review the HJ dates and then compliance. So as we look at this, this overview, it really all started with September 11, 2001. Literally thousands of people died that day. 343 firefighters died that day. There was failure of the communication system in the building where police and fire could not transmit with a two-way radio out of the building. And as we look at a similar system, what we call a Mayday, a firefighter will declare a Mayday if they're in trouble in a building, similar to what you'll see on an airplane or with a boat captain or crew in trouble. They will transmit a Mayday. And somebody needs to hear that. And when people are in buildings with the new construction especially, those Maydays may not get out. So that good communications is important to first responders as well as the public as we go forward. So statutory, I come right back to that this is Florida Statute 633-202, again, enacted by the Florida legislature originally in 2016. The bill was introduced, it was signed by the governor. It has been modified a few times, but nothing major. The intent is there each time it's put in place. But the authority having jurisdiction shall determine the minimum radio signal strength for fire department communications in all new and existing buildings. So the two-way communication enhancement systems may be used to comply with minimum radio signal strength. And we're going to look at what that minimum radio strength is and the authority having jurisdiction saying what it is. Florida statute, again, I'm spending a few minutes on that. Some changes that were made. They took out wood frame buildings with exterior corridors less than 75 feet. There may be a few of those around. There's not many, but they did do that. And then if you do have that and you're declaring that as an exemption, you must have documentation that's the case.
I think Ian took out a lot of that.
Yes. So there's part where a change was made with existing high-rise buildings and where they gave them time. Now, this originally was put in place in 2016, but people should be getting that testing done now because by statute, it's in place at the moment. By January 1, 2024, you should have a permit or you should be under contract with your contractor having a permit. Now, today is May 2023. January 1, 2024 is going to come up very quick. So the key to this is getting testing done and having that permit. So as you see here, January 1, 2025 is when the existing high-rise buildings must be in compliance and must have the installation of the enhanced two-way radio communication system.
On that note, Wayne, and maybe this is a Dane question, what is your lead time that you're giving property managers if they call and say, I need to schedule a test? Are you backed up? Because again, this is a statute that has been around, but they're giving us a deadline. Does it take 3 months to get get
less than 30 days, as early as 7.
Okay, so that's
to get the
right now.
test done. Yes.
To get the test done, and the report comes back how
immediately,
fast?
very very quickly, a day or two after.
Okay, All right, wonderful. Good information.
Yeah, that depends on the AHJ, and I'll let Wayne go through who the AHJs are, because there's actually a couple of different AHJs that you work with, authorities having jurisdiction within
Right.
each county.
Right.
So depending on their requirements, different testing. For instance, here in Collier County, they require not only the signals testing, but also two-way radio. So we actually go in with two-way radios that are on the radio network and test the audio within the building, along with a spectrum analyzer. I could pull it out, but no one would know what it was. It's a box with an antenna on it. And we test the frequency within the building on every floor.
Okay. Very good. Good knowledge, good information.
So that was a good segue into our next slide, where we're talking about the authority having jurisdiction, or you've heard the term AHJ. The Florida legislature saw fit to place this legislation in the Fire Prevention Code because the fire department has authority and responsibility to inspect new and existing buildings. So that goes with your local fire department. It hasn't been given to the law enforcement because law enforcement can't come into your building and do an inspection unless they have probable cause or they have a warrant. It wasn't given to EMS because emergency medical services does not do any type of inspections. So the appropriate place was to put it with the fire department, the fire marshal's office, the fire prevention office. And the second part of this is the local communication system. That would be, in our case, Collier County or Lee County or Sarasota County or Hillsborough County. They are part of the authority having jurisdiction that we work with to make sure we're in compliance with working with the radio system that's in place and not interfering with it and not creating problems for them. So your fire department, it's a unit of local government. And I go through this because who is it in your community? Well, it may be a city. In this case, we have Naples, we have Marco Island, the city of Cape Coral, you have city of Bradenton, city of Tampa, city of Sarasota. So you can have the city doing this inspection. But an example is in Naples, the best part of Naples or Collier County has a Naples address. But city of Naples is only 20 some odd square miles, where I live 6 miles from Naples, but I have a Naples address. So what else can take place is it may be a department or a division of county government. So a county fire department may be doing the inspection. Sarasota County has pretty much a county-wide fire department. It depends on the county. In Collier County, it's a unit of county government, maybe a dependent district. There's not as many of those around anymore, but there's a few. And then independent fire districts have a fire marshal's office or fire prevention. And there's a lot of those around. In Collier County, it's you've got North Collier, you've got Greater Naples, you've got Immokalee. As you get up into Lee County, there's about 20 independent districts up there. So you've got Estero as well as the city of Estero, but the Estero Fire Department has jurisdiction. Bonita Springs Fire Department has jurisdiction. Out on Fort Myers Beach, you've got a town out there, but the fire department has jurisdiction as an independent district. And then in each case, the agency's been given statutory responsibility as the authority having jurisdiction to require this to do these inspections.
And it sounds like Pure Wireless knows, Wayne, who has jurisdiction in all over the state. With all levels.
We work with a lot of different agencies, which is fine. This was a question that I actually picked up out of the Naples Daily News. It was put in there under community law questions and answers, and maybe many of you read these because issues come up about homeowners associations or condo associations. So the question was raised, and I'm going to read it. My condominium building received a notice from the fire marshal, one of those AHJs, that we must have the building tested for radio signal strength. And if the building does not pass the test, have a bidirectional amplification system installed by a certain date. Can you explain this law and the requirements? So let's go to the next slide there. And he answered this. And he said, he talked about in 2016, the fire prevention code was amended. The law required all buildings to test for minimum radio strength, all buildings. And the emphasis, a lot of emphasis on high rise, but it is all buildings. There's some legislation now that's going to exempt buildings less than 12,000 square feet. But if you deal with something like a civic center or a large meeting room, you may have to have these tests done. So
Yeah.
it's, I'm sorry?
Hospitals, right? You guys are at hospitals?
Big issue with hospitals where dead spaces, if you've ever been in a hospital and you can't use your cell phone, it's because there's a dead space and it needs to work in those dead spaces also. So it's based on the building's construction. Radio signals can be blocked, preventing this. The focus on the radio signal strengths stem from the difficulties experienced by firefighters attempting rescue operations on September 11, 2001. And he goes on in this.
Yeah. So when did the deadline come for 2025? So that looks like the statute's been in place, but now they're actually giving a deadline to enforce it. Is that what I'm understanding?
The deadline has been there. Because people are not in violation of the code yet, you know, the fire marshal and fire inspector won't come in and give you a notice of violation until that date passes. So what we're trying to do here today with you is get people ahead of that curve so they're not in violation and they're not in a place that they're trying to catch up and then they can't get that permit and then they can't get that installation and they could get cited for violation of the fire code.
Well, the counties, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dane.
Remember, it's January 1, 2024 that you have to have your building tested. And if it fails, and the AHJ requires that your building install a system to correct the failure, that is when you have to have the file for the permits, get under contract with a reputable company that can put in the system. There's a lot of work involved in this. You have to provide a lot of plans, heat maps. Fire code requires certain types of conduit and so forth. So it's not as simple as putting in like a Wi-Fi system for your guests. This is battery backed up, monitored, high availability system that has to be designed specifically to solve the problems that arise from the test that you did. And then those permits, once they're in place, they give you up to a year to put the system in. Okay. So that's why there's that 2024 to 2025.
And then I'm assuming that will be part of the fire marshal's inspection report every time they come out to see that you're in compliance with. Okay.
Yeah, right. The new legislation that that we were mentioning that's coming out July 1, exempting 12,000 square feet. That's 12,000 square feet unless there's an underground. We're in Florida. There's not too many underground areas in Florida. The 12,000 square feet and below are exempt. The same thing about the wood framing are exempt. You still have the time of 2024 and 2025 for high-rise buildings. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else we need to add to that. Probably not, but that's what's coming out July 1st will go into effect. It's already been passed by the House and Senate. The modification to this existing law. So,
and as you see, as he continued to answer this, he talked about January 1, 2024, then January 1, 2025, having the installation. It's a fact that the law applies to condominiums, co-ops. And he talks about the cost, and I think this was good because legal was giving this information. The cost of the system can be significant. So you get your applications early, retain a reputable company, as Dane mentioned, so you can get a quote and get testing done.
And from the property management side, we start budget season in June. So we're right here approaching June. So this is a good time, managers out there, to go ahead and get a price and get a quote from a reputable company like Pure Wireless to go ahead and work it into your 2024 budget.
Yeah, and,
exactly.
and the key here is that not every building fails.
Right.
And,
yeah.
You give you an example. You go down to Marco Island. a lot of the buildings in Marco Island have great radio coverage because they have antenna right on the building down there on the beach. So if they're having issues, it depends on where these issues are. Some issues may only be on a couple floors, and it may only be in the service elevator. We've had AHJs that say, okay, we're not going to ask the building owner to put in $50,000 worth of equipment to solve the problem on 3 floors of the service elevator. So even though you fail, you want a company that will honestly work with the AHJs to let them know exactly where those failures are and how bad they are, and help walk you through the process, because they by no means want to make you put in a huge amount of equipment, because too many antennas reduce the coverage of their radio network. So it's like a balancing act. They want good coverage in the buildings, but they don't want to reduce the coverage of their overall radio network for the county. So there is just as much a likelihood that you will get an exemption if you have very few failures than if you have a large number of failures, but there's a lot of antennas in the area that they just don't like that. And there's a reason for that. Again, it reduces the radio coverage.
Understood.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no, good. Well, and we look here at the building wireless coverage because we all recognize the 911 system as a universal emergency number to reach emergency service communication center. And along with fire and EMS and police, people that live in those buildings, the occupants should be able to use a cell phone and talk out of their building. And I've been in condos, and I've been in hospitals, and I've been in big box stores that you're unable to use that cell phone. So what can also come alongside this is the installation of enhanced cellular within a building, so the occupants can use that cellular at any given time. So I say that because we have what we call a reverse 911 system. If one has an emergency, they want to be able to use their cell phone to be able to talk out of their building. But in the counties also have in place what they call a reverse 911 system. And you want to be able to reach those occupants again. And what they do with the reverse 911 is they may have an area that they segregate. I'm just going to say the city of Naples, for example, or the city of Marco, and there's something going on and they recommend an evacuation of Marco. Or there's an active shooter someplace and they recommend staying in place, shelter in place. So those things can be used, and it's important that they do use landlines, they do use cell phones, but many people no longer have landlines in their homes. So it's very, very important. Talking about how important it is, building communications can be enhanced with antennas that are placed in maybe a hallway, then they're routed to the roof. So this becomes important not only for public safety, but for the occupants within the building. The nugget for you as a community association manager is, as you look forward into this budget season, you have the opportunity to improve cell phone service in your buildings also. My mom lives on Gulf Shore Drive on the first floor of her condo, and I go in there and I don't have cell service. It's a place we need to work on for them to upgrade. And I'm sure if they don't have cell phone service in there, their two-way communication system is not working may not be working for public safety. So as a nugget to the people that live in your buildings that are having trouble with their cell phones, and I'm sure they've told you, you have the opportunity to get this come alongside the installing of a two-way enhanced communication system. So the two-way communication system, it must be a well-designed system, as Dane mentioned, so it doesn't interfere with the current public safety communication system. And within many counties, and Collier's done a good job, they have what they call repeaters or additional antennas throughout the county. And if Marco's got one right there in the middle of Marco Island, for example, many of those condos may not need an enhanced communication system, but some may. And it's the quality of that public safety communication system that's important to this. And when they go ahead and say, hey, we're going to spend $10 million to enhance our communication system in a county, that's going to also help individuals, condo owners not have to spend additional money, that they've got good service for the fire service and EMS and law enforcement.
Yeah.
So some things that affect it, the installation, impact glass. We're seeing more and more impact or hurricane resistant glass. The depth and width of a building, whether it's concrete block or now they're using reflective insulation inside these. Height may vary. So these are the things that affect the two-way enhanced communication system for public safety. The first responder, a firefighter may be trapped, may have to request help transmitting that mayday. So it's important to the firefighter. The firefighter may require additional assistance to help with a rescue a victim. So as we look at that firefighter, as we look at that individual or firefighter that may be trapped, if they must be able to use what we call a handy-talkie or a walkie-talkie. And I would say, I'm 99% sure, but that every public safety person on duty, I'm talking about an EMT, a paramedic, a police officer, a deputy sheriff, a firefighter, a fire chief, they all have what we call a handy-talkie. So it becomes their lifeline if they're in trouble or they need additional assistance, but it has to work properly.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one is police and EMS. They are both rely on the system. The police officer may have to be in a situation where they go into a building with an active shooter, need to be able to speak out of that building. When we ran the slide there on the ambulance, EMS is the same. They get in a building and they're working a cardiac arrest, or they may need additional support. They must be able to transmit out of that building. The slide that's in front of you now is how it works, basically. And you see the outline of a building, and the building, you see the walkie-talkie down there, and that walkie-talkie is maybe police, fire, EMS, and it has the opportunity. It could transmit directly out of the building, but the buildings that we're having trouble with, it's going to pick up an antenna within the building. It's going to be coax somehow to a repeater in the building, a booster in the building. Then it goes out to an antenna and then directly out to the public safety system. So that's kind of the system in a nutshell, just so you kind of see how it would work. And if you had antennas in there for your cell phones, that would serve the same purpose to enhance your cell phone service. So testing and reporting, this becomes another important part of this. The fact that you want to, your vendor's going to provide testing. Your vendor's going to give you that testing that you can give the results to the authority having jurisdiction. So between now and January 1, 2024, and you have an inspector, fire inspector coming in, you have the opportunity to say, hey, here's our test, here's the results, we've passed. Or here's our results, and we're working on getting quotes to put the system in. Inspectors, fire inspectors are now, I would say they're not giving violations, but they're starting to educate the CAMs, the communication managers, whoever it may be, the building owner, just up to what needs to take place. And again, if you have that results, you got to have the opportunity to share it with the inspector. The testing, it's going to take place on all floors. The fact that we have what we call critical areas, there's areas that become very, very important to the fire service or emergency services. So it is going to be important that critical areas such as command rooms, fire pump rooms, elevators, exit stairs, passageways, those areas are deemed critical, and they must have a 99% coverage, and then the rest of the building would have a 90% coverage.
Look, I've got a couple of questions.
Sure.
Let's see. Alex asked, can I confirm the necessary process for a property that is unaware if they have the required two-way connection? So the
Okay,
process.
Yeah, go ahead and ask it one more time. I'm sorry.
He said, can I confirm the necessary process for a property that is unaware if they have the required two-way connection? So they're gonna need to get testing first, correct?
Yes, correct. That's the first step. And if they have, and we're going to talk about this a little bit in a minute, but a test, if someone comes in and says your building needs 100% coverage, and they say it's going to be, I'm going to throw a number out there, $200,000. But a question to ask people doing the testing is, what happens when you go out and test? Are buildings passing? Are buildings failing? And if they say, oh, 99% of the buildings are failing, find somebody else to do the test. I know our experience with Pure Wireless. I know Dane has gone out and tested buildings, and they were not required, their test results was they needed to put in a two-way enhanced communication system. When Dane did his test, he found out the building did not need a two-way enhanced communication system. So I share that because you want to make sure you have a reputable vendor, and you have the opportunity to maybe not have to put anything in. All right. So now, as we go further,
Alex just confirmed. So, he's understanding you find the vendor to complete the inspection, and then based on the inspection, you determine if you have to install additional equipment. And then do you confirm that with the fire marshal? So question is it with your test, is it a pass fail, or is it here's where you're failing? And then you can show it to your local fire marshal and jurisdiction that oversees and makes that decision and say, do we really need to do this or not?
Yeah, definitely work close with your authority having jurisdiction. Dane mentioned there was a couple, I'm going to say whatever it was, elevators or something that failed, but it was just a small, very small percent. And the authority having jurisdiction said, no, we're fine with that. They have the authority having jurisdiction. The fire department can say it's so small, it's not a problem. But what may occur, let me use this example. You may have a 10-story building, and the first 2 floors are parking garage, and then the 3rd floor becomes common areas, and the 4th floor is apartments or condos. And you may find out that the building 5 stories and up has great coverage. The building below 5 stories needs the enhanced communication system. And you want to continue to work with your authority having jurisdiction, because here's another part of this example with this. Some fire departments are using repeaters in their fire trucks. So they can get close to the building, and they're saying they work sometimes, that their two-way communication system, their radio, their handy talkie can talk to the fire truck and then repeat the information out. The problem with that is, unless a fire truck is there, law enforcement or EMS does not have that in their vehicles. So it could be, very, very, it may be bonita, it may be a sterile, but that's important to work with your fire department, because they may not require anything. So because the authority having jurisdiction has the authority to say yes to an inspection, no to an inspection, or we're going to meet the requirements in our vehicles. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think it did. I've got a couple more questions, if you don't mind, that are have to do with this slide. Ray asked if are parking garages considered critical areas?
It's not critical, but it would be in that 90% coverage. God, Dane.
Parking garages are considered like any floor, so it's considered the general coverage. If it is part of the building, under roof, an open carport type, some of these condominiums have carport type. They have a roof, but no walls and so forth. That's not necessarily needing to be tested. But if it's I know it's not underground in Florida, but you know what I mean. It's under the first floor, the lobby area. You have 1 or 2 levels of garage below that in the building. That is fully enclosed. That's part of the building, and it is a floor of the building. A separate parking garage that is totally enclosed, let's say like at Mercado here, where you have a big parking garage, that would need to be tested. But that would be considered general coverage. But the critical areas within those floors, the stairwells and elevators and any fire hookups and so forth, that would be considered, those areas of those floors would be considered critical.
Good, thank you. I've got a couple more questions here. Joey asked, how does this relate to the sounders that are cabled to the fire alarms?
This will actually, go ahead, Dane, you can answer it. Go ahead. No.
Okay, so this does not have anything to do with that, and is a separate legislation, separate compliance. So no, we do connect to your fire alarm systems and are required to be monitored, but we do not interact with those pieces.
Okay. Yep, it does. Two separate issues. Yep. And then Judith has asked, we had our building tested 4 years ago in 2019. Is it still valid?
No. And here's why. I take that back. Depending on your AHJ, AHJ may say it's fine because quite frankly, AHJ can do whatever they want. Mm-hmm. We have some AHJs that don't require any testing whatsoever. We have others that require testing only on certain types of buildings. Some have different levels of testing and so forth. So be aware that with that caveat, I believe that your building would need to be tested again, especially if it's 4 years old, because of several factors. One, the changes in the frequency specifications have changed. The standards have changed since 4 years ago. Some have gotten stricter. A lot have gotten less strict. Your AHJ may have changed their how they want to enforce, and the radio network may have changed because a building could have been built near your building or something changed with the overall radio network. In the future, come July 1, and this is what I forgot to mention before, is that they're going to require testing on a 3-year basis for high rises and 5-year basis for everything else. So if you're like a 3-story building, commercial building, they'll probably, you get tested every 5 years. Again, it's up to your local AHJ on whether they push that or not. So I would suggest that you contact your AHJ or have us or a testing company contact your AHJ. So before you get another test, so you make sure you have to have another test. And then if you do have to have another test, just make sure that they are approved by your AHJ and that they're using the latest code, standards and legal.
Great. All right, we'll finish up all questions at the end so we can make sure we get through, but we'll go to the next slide if you guys are ready. Thank you for answering those questions.
So as we look at moving forward with testing, an initial testing takes place by the building owners, may be taking place in new construction. As that system is accepted after it's installed and put in, it's under the supervision of the authority having jurisdiction. And then finally, as Dane mentioned, some ongoing testing that's contracted by the building owner or the CAM, make sure it's in the budget so it can be tested as we go forward. Get that initial test done, and then depending on your building and depending on your authority having jurisdiction, it may be a 3 or 5 year inspection.
Okay.
So again, the authority having jurisdiction, they may come in requiring the use of a two-way radio. That may be the extent of their test. They may look at, and then that's voice quality. There's discretion there as we look at measuring it with tools or equipment. It's gridded, measure signals with a methodology that's shown in the next slide. So it's broke down into small areas. You'll see that in this case, we're looking at a 50 by 200 by 200 foot building. That's a big building. That'd be an acre. But in this case, it's broke down to a 50 by 50 foot area. And you see that it's gridded and there's testing done in each of those locations to make sure it works. That's a big box, a big square. But when we go in and we put a condo in there and we put hallways and everything that goes with it, it's going to be tested in all those areas. Just a quick look at what that test looks like. So the cost of compliance, there's things that come with it. The location of where antennas may go. Testing can be as little as a few $1,000s, but the installation could be hundreds of thousands of dollars. So again, budget, make sure you're ahead of the curve there. We did learn from some financial institutions. This is something you could finance, so it's not such a burden as an assessment. So always keep that in mind. But it does make safer buildings for the occupants as well as public safety. So the costs involve many items. And again, we talk about the conduit, the fact that you have to have a backup power supply. That monitoring is required plugged into your fire alarm system. That monitoring, it's automatic. We use a dedicated panel going into the alarm system. And basically what it's going to show is if there's problems with the system, if there's a malfunction in the system, it's going to give it trouble. You've all seen what those look like, but it's going to pop up, show that there may be a problem. Somebody knocked out an antenna. So you get that system back up as quick as possible. The installation, right, we go back to a close coordination with the CAM because you start putting antennas up on the roof and there's owners that say, nah, I don't like that where that antenna is. So you want to do these things right the first time. You may be going through a penetration through a roof. It may require fire rating in there. Working with the roofing contractor. If you're penetrating the roof, you don't want to avoid any warranties. So it's working together with multiple contractors, working with a reputable contractor to install this, but they're working in conjunction with the CAM.
Especially when you're dealing with elevators.
Okay, yeah, great. These are all great points. Yeah.
So going back to antennas being visual, there's wind loading. The antenna mass and ballast suitable for required heights are important. You may have a taller mass. You know, again, you want to work close with the installers to make sure you don't have owners that say we just don't like that. And you want to reduce the cost. Keep the runs going to the roof simple. The fact that a building may lose power, you're required to have a 12-hour battery backup. But if you have a automatic starting generator with some storage batteries, then it's 2 hours of operation at 100% capacity. And these things can go in line with things you're doing anyways, improvements that you're making to your buildings with generators and those things. So it all comes together to be important and keep the system up and running. So there are antennas that we're looking at internally. You may have that antenna in the hallway. You may want to make sure that as the manager, you have it in your office or the security offices. Those, and again, keeping in mind, there's the opportunity to do public safety as well as your cellular system and saving and reducing the cost overall by doing that at the same time. Okay, we talk a little bit about liability here. That what happens without compliance? Well, we know that that's going to be addressed by the court. We know that in Surfside, the condo that collapsed, those lawsuits are in the over $1 billion. So what happens is, and what's happening there is, everybody gets sued. The architect, the engineer, the community association manager, the board of directors, and in that case, even individual unit owners. So no matter what you're doing, getting ahead of the curve, being proactive, especially as the CAM, you're advising your board that we need to budget for these things, we need to make these things happen. It reduces your liability as well as your association's liability. As we look at the community association manager, you're the primary contact with the fire department. We often see that. The authority having jurisdiction requesting a test. As the CAM, getting ahead of that curve, you can, before the fire inspector comes in there, you can have that test done. It's completed. And instead of the fire inspector saying, well, you're going to have to do this in the future, you can turn around and hand the fire inspector your test for compliance, or show the inspector that, well, we had a test. We're going to be installing the systems in a few areas that require it. Contracting for a vendor. This is now the time to do it. It shows that you're proactive. Again, going back to that budgeting as you're going into budget. And I repeat this because ask your vendor about how many buildings fail. And if they say, oh, 99% fail, then find another vendor or have a second test. And you shouldn't necessarily have to have a second test, but many buildings are going to be tested and they're going to pass. So the cheapest way to do it is get the test done as early as possible. And even though there's that 3 and 5 year requirement down the road, because conditions can change, you can certainly be ahead of the curve now, especially not trying to hurry up and get it. And the vendors are saying, we got things booked out for 6 months.
Right.
I mentioned some may require on some floors, some may require on other floors. If a countywide system is properly designed, no equipment may be required. So there are dead spots in the county. We were meeting with county officials years ago, and they were going with a new vendor, and the vendor said 75% coverage. And I sat on that committee, said that is unacceptable, that the public safety system has 75% coverage. Now, let's work for 100% coverage for everybody. And I think in the final analysis of it, because we have a lot of Everglades and those things in Southwest Florida, we ended up with 95% coverage. But 75% was way too many areas of dead coverage.
Yeah.
So your board of directors is obviously responsible to comply with the installation. A building in violation of fire code may be unsafe for first responders, owners, and visitors. You have the opportunity again to be proactive. That's key to this.
I've got a question in regarding to being compliant. So Alex asked, does the contractor who performs the test provide the association with an official document stating that the building is compliant? So
go ahead, Dane.
Some AHJs will issue after a report is issued by a vendor. So in our instance, we issue a report. That report, some AHJs, if it's a passing report, they just require that you keep that on site for the next fire inspection. And it's sent to the AHJ as well by the vendor. Others will actually issue you, some will, some won't, will actually issue you a compliance letter on a passing. And they'll definitely issue you a compliance letter once if you fail and you have a system put in place, you have to have a compliance letter that says that system has been installed and accepted by the AHJ that's responsible for the FCC license for the radio network. So there's different areas will handle this differently. Some will give you something on a pass. Some will only require you to have the report that we give you. Failures always need something. And some of the ones that fail but pass because the AHJ says 3 floors of an elevator were good, they'll give you a letter. Or if I was the CAM, I would at least make sure they gave me something in writing that says I don't need something. And
Right.
so what we do is that we try to walk this process from beginning to end, not just do a test and send you a bill with a report. So
Okay.
That's us. I would hope that others do the same.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the inspections here just for a minute. So you go to the next slide and you'll see that fire code violations. Now, fire code violations can be anything from exit signs to emergency lighting to items in the hallway or in a stairway. But those are things that are quick fixes. You can make those happen. But one of the things is a building with fire code violations may, and I say may, hinder, slow down, or prevent a unit from being sold. Due diligence by a prospective buyer may reveal fire code violations. Now, they use title companies and they do title searches and those things. Commercial buildings often will ask for a fire code inspection before they buy a building or enter into a business. It's a simple public records request to the fire department to provide that information. But if your building is in violation of the two-way enhanced communication system not working, someone may say, I'm not buying in this building. And it all of a sudden there's an uproar. All of a sudden people are saying, well, I may want to sell my building next year. If there's fire code violations, I won't be able to. So again, another little nugget that to keep your building in fire code compliance. Just quickly, as we go through what we learned today, 633, it's a question. Is an ordinance, statute, or a recommendation? And the answer to that is it's statute. It's law. Again, next one, please, as we go through the learning assessments. The AHJ is the authority having jurisdiction. Again, something you've heard before, you've heard it today. It's true. The AHJ is the authority having jurisdiction. In reference to 633-202, is it the police department, fire department, or emergency medical services that has the AHJ responsibility? And the answer to that is your local fire department. They have responsibility, they have authority to do those inspections and work with the CAMs to make sure they have the proper testing and installations. The next one is what does the fire department have? Inspection authority, and that inspection authority comes from a Florida statute in the Fire Prevention Code to do those inspections. What's the dates? We kind of went through this, but the dates are January 1, 2025 for the installation of the system, and others should be in compliance now. So there's a lot of work to do, a lot of tests to take place. But keeping in mind, these are high rise. Your building may not be a high rise, so technically it should be in there now, but be proactive by January 1, 2024. Make sure you've got the inspection, and hopefully you have a contract and you have a permit that by January 1, 2025, you'll be installing the system. And then just some conclusion here. Florida statutes gives the authority to the AHJ. The systems are important to all owners, visitors, public safety. All buildings should be tested and working towards compliance. Time is of the essence, and then requires the installation again by January 1, 2025. And just some references where we got the information. State Fire Marshal's Office, Naples Daily News with Legal Matters. Richard DeBosch wrote that, NFPA.
I do a lot of work with Richard. And there's information. We do have a couple more questions that came in, and we're right on time, guys. Good job, Wayne. All right, let me get through. Sharon has a question about radiation from the, I guess, of the routers. So how do you I used to work in a hospital and actually worked and I had to be, but I was in a cath lab where we use radiation every day. So, and the exposure was very minimal to me right next to the radiation. So I don't know what is, tell me a little bit about that.
The antenna systems that are installed in your building, well, let me back up. The radio networks for public safety are on much lower frequency bands than what you're getting from your cell phones. So the radiation coming from an antenna on a public safety antenna inside your building would probably be quite a bit less than what anything you're receiving that's in your back pocket. It's older frequencies, the old 800 megahertz, 700 megahertz bands, if that means anything to those on the call. If not, that just means that it's on the lower, less radiating area, and it's a passive system. So you're not being constantly radiated by antennas. I don't see that as a problem on the public safety side. Most people are scared about 5G, and it's the millimeter wave version of 5G. That's what all the
cell phones.
Yeah, about cell phones and 5G, because it's millimeter wave. It's a higher frequency and so forth. But it's being deployed all over the United States, and if there was an issue with even that, then I would think that you would be having some problems. But most 5G will not penetrate a building, so most of the signals you're getting are the normal frequencies that you get from your cell phones. I saw some questions about Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi operates in the lower frequency bands too. They're not up there in the very, very high frequency side. So I don't see it I personally don't see it as an issue, but I'm not a doctor.
Yeah, I don't, like I said, I just worked in the hospital and I had my little badge that I wore to see how much radiation I was exposed to next to fluoro every day. But yeah, I don't know how, I don't know how that's checked.
You're actually dealing with radiating much higher radiation than what you get from my antenna.
That's what I was around. So Joey's got a question. He said, our building is 2 stories, masonry construction, less than 40 feet in height, 12 unit condo unit. Is this inspection required for us?
You probably have separate entrances going into each condo. You probably don't have a common area. So for buildings like that, they're under 3 stories. I would definitely check with your local fire district and see if they would require it, because there's, again, the authority having jurisdiction. I would not just go get a test done without them saying, yes, you need it, because there is a good chance that you probably do not need it.
Okay, thank you. And then Ray's asking if we can share these slides. I'll let that be up to Pure Wireless. We will have Ray, this webinar will be it's recorded, and we will be sending out a link to this recording so that you can share it with any other board members or your property manager as you'd like, so they can hear it as well. And
we're also giving CE credits for those that
the managers.
So, yes.
Yep. All right. Is that all the questions for everyone? Wonderful. Great information. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Dane. Great. Good information, great webinar. And again, Sean and I will both be sending this out to everyone that attended with a link to this webinar, and it will be on our website at Castle Group, www.castlegroup.com.
It's a pleasure, Laura. Nice meeting everyone.
Thank you guys. Have a great rest of your day.
Stay safe.